I am Liffey and welcome to another planty video. Today's video is about soil, or soil additives, I guess. It's not about soil, it's about soil additives. So I'm not going to be showing you my arrowed mix or anything like that. There's going to be no soil mixing going on. I wanted to actually sort of break down what each of these things are. Because, I mean, myself included, I mix up my own soil mixes for my plants using a whole bunch of things. But I haven't really seen much out there showing what each of these things is, where they come from, what they actually do. So this is what this video is. It's just a quick little breakdown, not very in-depth at all, but kind of about the main things that you see as soil additives and what they actually are. So when you're mixing soil up together for your plants, you're kind of hoping to reach a balance of 4 different aspects, I think. It's drainage, so how much water will either stay in or drain out of your pots. Aeration, so how airy your soil is, how much air you're wanting to reach your roots. Nutrients, how much the soil mix is going to retain nutrients around your plants. And support, keeping your plants in the pot basically. So those are kind of like the 4 things that you're trying to balance out with the following list of things. The first of those is peat moss. Peat moss is essentially decomposed sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss, I don't know. So peat moss is formed over thousands of millennia in bogs in the absence of air. So this creates a really, really dense, nutrient-rich material. But the problem with peat moss, and I feel like this is important to say, is it is not sustainable. So while it is a really nice additive for your plants, there are other alternatives that are much more ecologically friendly. This is not a sustainable thing to be adding in. So if possible, avoid peat moss. That's going to be my little PSA for the earth. The bonuses of peat moss, I guess, are that it doesn't compact down. So some soils and soil mixes you'll find compact down, and this reduces aeration and can increase your chance of root rot. If you put peat moss in, Rosie's scratching like a crazy cat, it reduces that risk. It's slightly acidic on the pH scale, but it is also completely sterile, which means that you know that you're not getting any nasty bugs or weeds or whatever in when you're mixing it into your plant soil. So pros, yes. Very big con is it's not sustainable at all. So that would be peat moss. Oh, it's also incredibly good at retaining water. So if you want a good water retention thing in your soil mix, then peat moss is actually a really good thing to use. The next one would be Coco coir. It's weird, I've never said these things out loud before. I know what they are, but saying them is weird. So Coco coir. This normally comes in a cube or a box and you have to rehydrate it. This is the sustainable alternative, sorry, Rosie's playing with a toy, sustainable alternative to peat moss. It's a byproduct of the coconut harvesting industry, I think. She's playing with catnip, it's so cute. Coconut fiber industry. So being a byproduct, it's nice to use that waste product. It's slightly less acidic, I think, than peat moss, but has also quite a good water absorbency rate. It's completely inert. So this is a soil additive that literally has no nutrients in it whatsoever. Which I guess is, I mean, it's not great. So you'll just have to be aware if you're adding Coco coir in that you're going to need to sort of add extra nutrients in. It's also used in semi-hydroponics. So if you're setting up a soil system, you can actually plant directly into Coco coir, which is pretty cool. Another alternative is actually a rice hull, which is something that I haven't been able to find here for a decent price. They seem to be very expensive. But this is something that you can add in to increase aeration, but it's also an alternative to using peat moss, and would be the most sustainable, I would say, because it is, again, a byproduct of shelling rice. So that's a really nice thing that you can add in. You can also use it as a mulch on the top of your soil, which is super handy, but it basically increases aeration, increases drainage, and is a really nice additive to put into your soils. So the next on the list is perlite, and it's little white sort of granules. It's formed from volcanic glass, actually. It's when obsidian meets water, I think, and then magic science compression happens, and perlite is formed. It's a great thing to add into your soil if you want aeration, and it's very porous, so it creates a really nice drainage for soil. It's got a neutral pH as well, so it's pretty doesn't really do anything other than drainage. It is very light though, so you'll notice if you add a lot of perlite into your soil that it can kind of sometimes float up to the surface because it is just so light. But it's obsidian, that's baller. The one thing that I will tell you with perlite is do not breathe it in. If you're using perlite, you'll notice the bags have a lot of dust in the bottom. Try and cover your mouths. I mean, we all have masks now because of the current situation. So wear a mask, I would say, when you're working with perlite. You don't want to get those tiny little obsidian glass shards in your lungs. That's not going to be good for you. So I would highly, highly suggest protecting your nasal passageways when working with perlite. Then another one on the list is vermiculite. So you'll kind of see perlite and vermiculite spoken about in similar terms. So vermiculite is compressed dry silicate, but it's super absorbent. So vermiculite is used more when you want water retention as opposed to drainage. It has a neutral pH, but when it's mixed in with like a couple of other things, I think like potassium and magnesium and stuff in your soil, it can actually help increase the acidity a little bit, but it itself is a neutral pH. I would suggest adding vermiculite into your soil if you are needing higher water retention. So you'll see if you buy some and you add water to it, it starts off dry and then it soaks it up like a sponge. And imagine that being around the roots of your plants. So you want to make sure if you're adding vermiculite in that you are putting it into a soil mix of plants that want that dampness or higher water retention as opposed to good drainage. So it's also good for starting seedlings, like nice little vermiculite, little soaky, soaky, spongy, happy place for them. Another one that's in the similar vein is pumice. So pumice and perlite, I would say, are the most interchangeable, but pumice doesn't compact down and doesn't float up. So pumice, I would say, probably a better choice if you can get your hands on it as opposed to perlite, but that would be my personal opinion. So this comes from mining volcanic rock. Basically when magma cools, it makes like this frothy mix, and that's sort of basically what pumice is. Pumice, I think, is the same stuff that you use on your feet. So the nice thing about pumice is it doesn't have to be treated in another way. So perlite and vermiculite, when they're mined up from the earth, they then have to go through like chemical processes to get them to where we can use them, whereas pumice is just mined straight out of the earth and used. So while it is, there is a sort of lack of sustainability in certain regards, it does have an ecological impact, that's what I'm trying to say. Less processes have to be done to it for us to use it. So, you know, it balances out, I guess, a little bit. So in terms of those three, it's the most ecologically friendly and carbon footprint wise. So you would use pumice, similar reasons if you want to increase aeration, if you want to increase drainage, and also it has a neutral pH. So it's basically just there to add some space and airiness to your soil to help the roots be able to breathe and spread out really nicely and not get clogged up with water. Another additive that you're going to see people talk about quite a lot is orchid bark. And the most common type of orchid bark you can buy is fir bark, and it comes in 3 different coarsenesses. I think it's fine, medium, and chunky, or coarse. I don't know what the normal one is. So you are going to use orchid bark if you are growing epiphytes. So epiphytes are plants that don't necessarily need to be planted in soil. They grow on trees, out in nature, you know, clinging to the sides. So things like orchids, staghorn, stuff like that. Orchid bark is really nice. Basically, it just gives them, the roots, something to grip onto, but doesn't clog them up. It's a really scientific description. So obviously bark is a natural material, and other natural materials that I've mentioned, like rice hulls and stuff, they're eventually going to decompose and break down. So the chunkier the orchid bark you use, the longer you'll have to go between repottings. The finer the bark, obviously it's going to decompose quicker, which in terms of nutrients and stuff for the plants is good, but in terms of repotting, you're going to lose your aeration and stuff that's provided by that chunky bark. So you kind of have to work out, monitor if you're using these sort of naturally decomposing things in your soil mixes. Then you have something called horticultural charcoal. Sometimes you'll find that they automatically mix horticultural charcoal into orchid bark mixes. So the one that I buy is a combined orchid bark horticultural charcoal mix. So it's like a 2-in-1 vibe. But horticultural charcoal is just something that you can add into your soil. It doesn't do like super much. There's things that say like it draws away toxins and things. I put it in because it actually helps with drawing out water. It's absorbent, so I worry about root rot. So anything that I can add in there that prevents the forming of root rot, I will. So that's why I put horticultural charcoal into my mixes. It also helps to promote the growth of beneficial bacteria and fungi in your soil. So you want your soil to be a living thing. So a lot of people will say when you buy a potting mix and stuff, bake it in the oven before you use it. If it's got fungus gnats and stuff in, I would do that. But if not, you want to keep all those nice yummy microbes in there. Soil is a living thing, your plants are living things, and you want like that little mini ecosystem to be formed in your own pot environment. It happens naturally outside, but we're basically tearing these plants out of their natural environment and shoving them in a pot and being like, survive guys. So if we can create a nice little ecosystem for them in that pot as best we can, then I think we should, and horticultural can actually help with that. So the next on the list is Lekker. Lekker is a really, really interesting medium. It is semi-hydroponics, basically, if you're using it as a soil-less planting medium. What does it stand for? Lightweight expanded clay aggregate. So they're basically little balls. You can get some of the ones that are painted to be like different colors, different color scheme. Don't buy those. Just buy the normal clay Lekker that hasn't had anything added to it. All that additive stuff is junk and it's probably going to do terrible things to your plants. So that's my PSA on Lekker. Lekker itself is a sterile, non-nutritive medium. It's just clay balls. The nice thing about Lekker is if you're working in a semi-hydroponic setup is it really reduces your risk of pests. And we all know that pests suck. So soil, unfortunately, one of the things that you're going to get with soil probably is fungus gnats at some point, and you're not going to get stuff like that with Lekker, so that's a really nice bonus. So basically what it is these dry clay balls, you put them in your water and nutrient solution. You cannot just put Lekker in with water. Because Lekker is completely neutral and provides no nutrients to your plants, you have to add all the nutrients that would be in your soil or your fertilizer into your Lekker water. So you get a whole bunch of mixes of nutrients. You put those in and you put your plant in, and basically the clay balls then soak up the water and the nutrients, and your plant roots will grow around them, so it's nice aeration for them to kind of spread and grow, but also they can soak up the water and the nutrients as they need. So it's actually a really interesting medium to be planting in. You can also just sort of mix it into your soil mix if you want both some little pockets of water retention for your roots, but also to add some aeration. So you can do it like properly semi-hydro, or you can add it in as drainage in your soil mixes. Then another thing you can add in is compost. So I would highly encourage everybody to compost their kitchen waste if you possibly can. You don't necessarily have to live in a house with a garden. I live in a house with a garden now, and we have a compost pile outside, which is fantastic. Our kitchen waste goes in there. We have a bokashi, which you can actually add meat products and stuff in with you sprinkle something on top. I don't understand how it works, but it can break down all of your kitchen waste, which is amazing. And you add that into your compost pile and you get this beautiful nutrient-rich mix for your plants. You can also do it in an apartment in the bokashi. There are ways to do it. So I would strongly encourage you composting your kitchen waste if you possibly can, because it's good for the environment and good for your plants. Basically, if you add compost in, it's going to really increase the nutrients for your plants, but also the water retention. So I would say in your potted plants, don't add too much. You don't want it to be a soggy mess in there, but it really does help to boost the kind of nutrient qualities of the soil mix. Another thing you'll see is potting soil and potting mixes. Potting soil is not meant for indoor plants. It's too heavy. It doesn't have all the nice additives that you want for a potted plant. That is for garden. Potting mix will be stuff that's already like ready-made, has like perlite and vermiculite and whatever mixed into it already. So they'll be specifically mixed for different things. So you'll be able to buy like a cactus mix, an orchid mix or whatever. So that's a mix as opposed to a potting soil. A potting soil is basically soil for outside, and I would say is normally quite heavy. So if you're buying for outside, potting soil. If you're buying for inside, potting mix. Another additive that you see spoken about quite a lot, particularly in terms of succulents, is sand. This would be one that I would hesitate to suggest. Sand does increase drainage, but if you don't do it in the right proportions, it can actually just create this really dense, clay, claggy, non-drainy situation. The last thing on the list is worm castings. I think it's also called vermicast. This is essentially worm droppings. It's kind of like compost, I guess. It's just a nice way to pump some beautiful nutrients into your soil. So if you're wanting to naturally fertilize, I would suggest some worm castings. On the whole, adding worm castings in is really good for your soil. It increases the fertility, increases the nutrients, and will all around result in happier plants. So that would be another thing that you can add in. Yeah, Misty. And I think that that is pretty much the basic list of soil additives. Obviously, there are a lot more things that you can add in. These are just the ones that I sort of found are the most suggested, most spoken about, and also the ones that I use. I don't use all of them, but I do use some of them. So yeah, that's kind of things that you add into your soil 101. I hope that was helpful. I hope it kind of explains why you would add certain things into your plants. But I would suggest obviously doing your own research as well. This is just very much an intro to each of those additives. But I hope it was helpful. And thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate you being here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, here is the link. I'd love to have you be part of the family. I'm really enjoying watching this channel grow and see what happens. If you have any suggestions for videos as well, please let me know. This was actually a suggestion from Kyla. So Kyla, thank you so much for asking me to do this. This was really interesting. Anyway, stay safe, be kind, and I will see you guys next time for another planty video. Bye guys.